Good morning, everyone. This is TOSB Conversations. Just give us 2 minutes and we'll be live. Our guest is also here, Varun Agarwal. So we're just waiting for people to join in. So we start on time at 11:30. Just a minute more. Right. Welcome to TOSB Conversations. I'm Danish with you. And TOSB Conversations, let me just give a big background to all of you. TOSB Conversation is a platform that brings perspectives from leading experts across diverse fields on the ideas that are shaping our world today. This is brought to you by the Outstanding Speakers Bureau, a service which works with hundreds of aspiring minds from across the globe who deliver experiential knowledge and cutting-edge insights from the businesses. And today we're going to talk about, it's a very interesting topic which we thought it's very, because we have many stories to share with people. So it is, write your book and get published. And our guest today is Varun Agarwal. He's an entrepreneur, a filmmaker, author. He's also seen as a youth icon. He's the founder of Mento. It's a very interesting platform. Visit it. It's an online platform for creative education. And his other company is Alma Mater, which is India's largest provider for merchandise for schools, colleges. And if you feel that you want to create something for yourself, for your organization, Alma Mater is meant for it. He's also a filmmaker. He has directed the likes of Preeti Zinta, A.R. Rahman. In his music videos, he has films which has probably over 400 million views, last which I checked on YouTube. And his debut novel, How I Braved Anuvanti and co-founded the $1 Million Company, became a national bestseller within a month of its release, and it's already in its 11th print edition, selling over 3 lakh copies. So Varun, thank you very much for taking out the time and telling people that how do you write your story, how do you get it popular, and if you're lucky enough to get a movie out of it. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Danish. Just want to check if you can hear me and see me clearly.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Has anybody joined in?
I'm hoping. Wait, let me see. Okay, so what I can do, few instructions, guys. If there is a Q&A box, you can write your questions. We'll take that up. It's divided into 2 parts. So Varun will be speaking in the first 20 minutes, and then we'll take up questions. So I think we're just making sure that if you guys can hear us and listen to us carefully. So if you can give me a shout out on the Q&A bar, so we'll know that everything is fine. That would help. I'm also checking my phone, so at least I know people are there. Just this will become easy. So if you can write your questions or just say a hi to me on the chat box. Varun, I think there are a lot of people, that much I'm sure of, but just making sure that people are writing in the chat box, so at least I know that.
Tell them where the chat box is to ask the question.
Yeah, so if you guys can see where your mute button, your video button is there, next to the.
Yeah, I think they're up to guys.
Okay.
All right. So it's a very simple session. Basically, we're going to talk about how to write your book and how to get your book published. I think this is probably the best time to write your book and get your book published. Everybody is indoors. You have a lot of ample time to actually go ahead and write your book. So I feel not only is this the best time to write your book, but also in terms of publishing, there are numerous ways to get published. You can reach out to a publisher. You can self-publish. So also probably the best time to get published. What I'm going to do is I've divided this this talk into about 6 parts. Each part covers a separate section about how to get published and how to write your book. And what I'll do is I'll cover each part and then we can open it up to Q&A. And we'll quickly do a small Q&A before I go on to the next section. So basically when it comes to writing a book, there are just 6 broad categories, right? The first is basically how do you even get started? How do you actually go ahead and write your book? And how do you put down those 40 to 50,000 words that are needed in order to write a book? Once you write the book, how do you start the process of getting published? What is the process of reaching out to publishers? What's the process of getting in talks with publishers or agents? And how do you get your manuscript to a publisher? Once the publisher okays your manuscript, what's the process of watching out for things in the contract and getting a publishing contract? And once you have a publishing contract, then going to the phase of editing your book and basically designing your cover and getting your book ready for release. Once your book is ready to be released, how to market your book and basically how to take your book to the next level and establish yourself as an author. That's pretty much what the entire conversation is going to be about. What I'm going to start off with is something technical because the whole writing your book thing is a little complicated, so I'm going to come to that right towards the end. I'm going to start with the easy bit, which is basically how do you get your book published? See, you guys have to remember this. Getting your book published is probably the easiest thing anywhere in the world right now, because if you can't get your book published with a publisher, you can always self-publish your book. If you self-publish your book, there are no restrictions. Your book can be, 5,000 words, 10,000 words, 20,000 words, 40,000 words, anything at all. If you want to get your book published with a traditional publisher, they have a minimum word requirement, which is about 40,000 words for a fictional novel or about 30,000 words for a non-fictional novel. So there is no set word requirement as such, depending on where and how you're getting published. I'll first give you guys my story about how I got published, and basically then that'll set some context on whether this whole writing your book and getting published is easy or tough. So basically when I started writing, I had no idea how to write the book, and I had no idea in what format to write and so on and so forth. Basically what I had in mind is the overall plot, right? And what is the overall plot of my book? 2 guys trying to start their own company and basically dealing with Anu Auntie in the process. That is it. That was the one simple byline that I had to begin with. I had nothing else. And basically, as I went along, I built the story. So it's not like I had pre-planned the story. It's not like I had pre-planned the structure of the story. It's not like I had planned that this character will do this character will do that. I, in fact, discovered the story as I wrote the book. Now, during the process of writing the book, do you write the book with double space, single space? What font do you write with? Your spell checks, your errors. I don't think any of that really matters, right? Because that's where the publisher comes in and really sets everything for you. So technically what the publisher is looking for is how fresh the book is, how unique the book is, how great the story is, and if there is an audience for that kind of a story. And basically, so I wrote whatever came to my mind in terms of writing my story. I discovered the story as I went along. I focused on the characters a lot. I really fleshed out the characters. And then when it came time to when I felt I was kind of ready with the book, I printed it at a local Xerox shop, got it spiral bound, and then I started Googling for publishers. And the first publisher that showed up was Rupa Publishers, which was one of India's largest publishers. Now, never in my mind had I thought that I'll get published, but I thought I anyway have 40,000 words written and it's ready. What's the big deal? Why don't I just check the details of how to submit a manuscript and just send it over? What's the worst that can happen? And basically on the website, it's very simple, right? It says, send us the first 3 chapters of your book, send us your bio, and send us a proposal as to why your book is so unique and we should publish it. So I basically wrote out a proposal. I wrote out a summary of the book. I pulled out the first 3 chapters and I mailed them. And they said, this sounds interesting. Now we want to see the manuscript to see if we'd be interested in publishing the book. So I sent them my spiral bound copy and then I waited. Now, you guys have to remember that it takes time to hear back from the publisher. Every publisher has tons and tons of manuscripts to go through. So before you can actually hear back from the publisher, it really takes a lot of time. So after about 2 months, they wrote back to me saying that they want to publish the book. And that's when I started the entire publishing process. The publishing process took about 6 months. This includes the editing of the book, designing of the book cover, getting the book ready for release. And once the book got released, then begins the process of marketing your book. Now, please remember that no book is going to turn into a bestseller overnight, right? So basically, the road to success for my book was about 2 years. So the moment the book came out, it took about 2 years for the book to really reach out to a large number of people, and after doing n number of marketing activities, and finally, after 2 years, did it finally start seeing the light of day and started becoming the success that it eventually became. But for the first 1 year, it's going to be a very tough task. Not many people will hear about your book. You'll have to constantly market, constantly promote, constantly talk about it. And eventually you hit a tipping point where people will start recognizing your book and start, buying it. And once the book becomes a hit, there is even a chance that, you can get it sold for movie rights and somebody may be interested in making a movie out of your book and so on and so forth. So the things that can happen once you write a book is endless. But the process of writing a book and how to get there, that's what I'm going to be talking about, and I'm going to simplify it for you guys. So in the comment section, can I say, is it clear up till now? Yes. Can I get a yes in the comment section? In the Q&A section?
Varun, there are multiple questions have started pouring in. So I think before people can clear that, let me just, if you can answer this question. This is from Vasu.
Yeah.
Same thing. Why no publishers in India is ready to take chances over here to publish your book?
They're in the business of publishing your book. So they have to take chances. In fact, I think publishers take more chances in India than the West. And the chances of you getting published in India is much higher than the West. Simple reason, not many people in India write, right? So the supply versus demand is very little. So the fact that if you can even put 40,000 words together in a decent enough story, there's a high chance that you will get published. Because while there may be a lot of quantity that these publishers will receive, the quality is very, very little. And also, you need to understand the kind of readership that India has, right? You can even succeed as a pop fiction writer. You don't need to be that great, that good in English. You can even write just plain, simple English and still get published. And if that route doesn't work out, you can always self-publish. I don't know if you guys know, but Amish, who is the highest-selling author in India, self-published his first book before he found a publisher. And he's currently the highest-selling, more than Chetan Bhagat. The guy sold more copies than any other author in India. And he self-published. Why? Because more than 100 publishers reject. So a publisher rejecting you does not mean your book is bad, right? You can always self-publish and see whether there is enough readership for your book. So that is the more important thing.
Right. Okay. The other one is you mentioned it already. That how long does it take to publish your book?
So the entire process from getting a yes from a publisher to actually hitting the stores takes about 6 to 8 months, depending on how much of editing is needed. If your book is already in a very, very good shape, mine was not. Mine was in a terrible shape, and I needed a lot of editing. But if your book is in a really good shape, it's already like almost half edited. Well, then about 6 months tops till it hits the shelves.
Right. And the self-publishing part, how does that is taken care of?
Oh, the self-publishing bit is very easy. There are numerous self-publishing websites online. Basically, what you got to do is just go and type self-publishing on Google, and you'll see so many different self-publishing websites. Even Kindle or Amazon allows you to self-publish. Basically, what you need to do is upload a PDF version of your manuscript, and there are certain checkboxes on Amazon which you got to do, and you actually can end up having your book on Kindle literally in a week, right? But self-publishing is probably the easiest route if you see that your book is now getting published by publishers. But I would say use that as the last option, because getting published by a publisher is the biggest validation any author can have, right? So only you get rejected by about 50 to 100 publishers, if there are that many, then go the self-publishing. Otherwise, don't.
Right. Okay, so Varun, there are multiple questions. We can go on with what you were saying. So a lot of people are posting it anonymously. It would be great if you write your name. It becomes easy and becomes much more interactive and personal. So Harsha, your question will be taken up, and there are 3 more. There's one from H that will also be taken up. So we'll at the end of the webinar, we'll be taking up all your questions. So Varun, you may please go ahead.
All right. So now, how do you get started to even writing a book? Well, number one, you shouldn't write a book to become a best-selling published author. Nobody writes a book with that in mind. I didn't write. I didn't even think I'm going to get published, and I don't think most authors write with the intention of becoming a best-selling author. Right. So number one, don't write because you want to be a best-selling author. Right. I don't think there is a rule like that where you can actually end up becoming one. It basically depends on how good your story is. So don't even start with that intention. In order to be able to write, I think you need to be able to read a lot. So I used to read a lot of books since my school days, college days, and all of that. And I used to particularly read a lot of biographies. Now, if you see the genre of my book, it's kind of semi-fictional biography, right? But because I read so many biographies, I knew the structure of how biographies work, and I knew the structures of how a book is written about somebody else. And that is why, for me, it was very easy to structure my book. Now, whatever genre that you want to write, make sure that you have read enough books in that genre. So it's very important that even before you start being an author, that you are a good, voracious reader. I don't know of a single author who does not read like mad, right? So I think to write well, or to write effectively, or to write to an audience that will end up reading a book, you need to be a great reader. The second thing is, I think you need to be observant. I was constantly observant about the things that were happening around me, specifically with the characters that were around me, how they behave, how they talk, how they present themselves, what are their characteristics, what are their quirks, what are their few things that that jumps out, and so as a writer, notice if you have that skill. Notice if you're noticing people around you, and in your mind, you're kind of making up a character for them. Or notice if you're finding yourself in funny situations, or even painful situations, and notice how you're dealing with those things, and notice if you're self-aware of those situations. So being observant, I think, is one of the most key aspects of being able to write a book. So apart from reading a lot of books, I think you need to be observant of not only the people around you, but also of the life events that are happening around you. The third thing is make sure that you gain enough life experience. I don't think you can be an introvert and sit in your home all your life and end up writing a book. You need to have enough life experiences. Now, these life experiences just does not need to translate to your book, right? For example, you could go on and write a fantasy fiction, but that fantasy fiction could come from a lot of life experiences that you get, right? So it's extremely important that you gain life experiences. Go out, put yourself out there, meet new people, put yourself in situations that you wouldn't otherwise find yourself in. But gaining life experiences is the only way you can build up a lot of stories, right? Otherwise, you'll find that your stories are very, very drawn from the things that you've read, or very drawn from the movies you've watched. But gaining personal life experiences is probably the best way for you to come up with ideas, come up with plots, come up with stories, come up with characters. Also, make sure that you feel a lot of emotions. Make sure you've gone through pain. Make sure you've gone through a lot of happiness. Make sure you've gone through all of those things. And that really adds to the writing process as well. But most importantly, write a story that appeals to you. Write a story that you want to write about. Write a story that you think is going to be great. Write a story that you think is awesome. Write a story that you don't care whether it will sell 1 copy, 1,000 copies, 1,000,000 copies. Write a story that you're very passionate about, and write a story that you build together. When you write a book, do not think about getting published. When you write a book, only focus on the story, and only focus on the story that is appealing to you. Most importantly, do not keep an outcome in mind. Do not keep the fact that, okay, my book is going to get published. Like I said, no author writes with the intention of getting published the first time. They write the story because they have a great story to tell, and they want to see if any publisher would be interested in publishing it. So write a story that appeals to you, but most importantly, don't write a story with the intention of getting published. And the last thing is, don't stop worrying whether you're a good writer or not. Right? I never questioned whether I had any writing capabilities. I never questioned whether I'll be a good writer. I never questioned whether I would be a bad writer. I just knew I had a great story to tell, and I just had to put those words to paper. Right? So if you are a person who constantly judges yourself, I would recommend probably work on that first, because if you critique your work too much, if you judge yourself too much, then you wouldn't end up finishing an entire book. And last but not the least, don't overthink. Right? It's just a book. It's just overhyped. Right? Which is what I'm here to tell you guys, that writing a book is not rocket science. It's just opening Microsoft Word and typing, guys. That's pretty much it. So don't overhype writing a book. Right? Whatever your story is, just go ahead and start writing it. And I think that's how it pretty much gets the entire process started. So this is the process of how do you get started, the very basic putting pen to paper for your book. Now, do you have any questions on this?
Right. Okay, Varun, so let's start from, we said that we'll take up a question from Harsha first. So, how much chance is there to select your manuscript after selecting your synopsis?
So I'm going to come to that because that entire section has been outlined about how that works, right? But technically, synopsis is not what it depends on. It depends on your proposal. How well can you write your proposal as to why your book is unique, why will people read it, and why you should be selected to get your book published. But I'll be doing an entire section on this.
Okay, let me see which one. So how do we approach the publisher?
Again, I'm going to come to that bit. So do you guys have any questions on how to get started?
Wait, let me see. I think more of the questions which are coming is that, okay, this is from a class 11 student based in Lucknow, and saying that I've read a lot of books and watched a lot of videos. But every time I sit down to write, I just can't write more than 20 to 15 to 20 pages. So that's a point where the person is getting stuck, right? Or the thing which you talked of, right? Or when I'm feeling, how am I supposed to go about it, right? There's a lot of vulnerability, there's a lot of insecurity which is there where people start judging me on those lines. I think that's one part which I feel that people are feeling right now. Where do I start?
Like I said, you need to stop judging yourself. You need to stop critiquing yourself so much, right? That's number one. Number two, if you're writing a story that really appeals to you, I don't think you'll get stuck in 15 to 20 pages. Which is why re-question the story you're writing. Because if it's a story that's very close to your heart, trust me, you'll end up writing and not care about what's going on. Number three, the fact that you're critiquing yourself or the fact that you're worried about whether the book is good or not, that means you're already thinking of the outcome, right? Don't worry whether the book will get published or not. Write it just for yourself. Don't worry whether the book will end up in a publisher's hand, or don't worry if somebody else end up reading it. Write it just for yourself in the beginning. And if you write it for yourself, why do you have to worry about whether the book is good or bad, right? End up writing the whole book first, right? And don't forget, a book goes through series of corrections, right? Like my book went through about 18 manuscript corrections. The overall book went through 18 different corrections before it finally came into shape of being what it's supposed to be, right? So your first attempt is never going to be the best attempt, but you need to make sure you end up writing the entire thing. And that is when you'll start fine-tuning it, start making it better, start improving on it. But don't focus on whether the book is good, bad, whether your writing is good or bad, whether your story is good or bad. Write a story that appeals to you very personally, and most importantly, do not judge yourself by writing it.
Right. Varun, there's a question which is, I think this is one which a lot of people say that, I think a lot, and I know what's happening around me, I'm observant, but this one thing which comes in their life, it's called procrastination. Right? They procrastinate, tomorrow I will write, or day after tomorrow I will write, but that putting down your words on MS Doc doesn't happen. How do you overcome something like that?
So I think procrastination is basically related not to laziness. Procrastination is basically related to motivation, right? You are not motivated to do something, and hence you're procrastinating. Which is why you need to get your intentions about writing a book right. If your intention about writing a book is because you need to get it done, then you will procrastinate. But because your intention of writing a book is to enjoy the process of building a story, building characters, building a plot, building multiple scenarios, figuring out how the characters interact with each other, figuring out what this character will say to that character. It's so much fun writing a book, right? Now, if your intention is that, then I don't think there is any procrastination. But if writing a book becomes a chore, or writing a book becomes because you need to write it because you want to be an author, or because of that, then you will procrastinate. So, which is why you need to eliminate the process from the outcome. You need to just enjoy the process of writing a book. And if you start enjoying the process, forget procrastination. You'll be so obsessed that you will actually procrastinate about everything else except writing the book.
Right. So, Amara, I think your question was also related to what Varun was talking about. This one is from Nikita. She's saying that I'm having troubles connecting two characters, basically binding a story. How do we overcome that?
So it's very subjective. Obviously, I can't really give a lot of comments on who your two characters are and how they are interacting with each other, right? But basically, what you've got to do is figure out how the characters are interacting in terms of if they have a conflict between them and how they're resolving the conflict, right? That's a standard step between most characters that interact with each other. Character 1, Character 2, Character 1, Character 2 basically have a conflict and they resolve that conflict, and basically then Character 1 and Character 2 get along or don't get along, and things move on. But how two characters interact with each other is so subjective, because a Sherlock Holmes and Watson or probably Harry Potter and the other characters, and how all the Game of Thrones characters, how they interact is very, very different from all different books, right? So how two characters interact really depends on your story, really depends on how you structure the characters, and really depends on the motivation of the characters. So I really can't tell you exactly how to make the two characters work unless I know the context of the book.
Right. Okay, this one is from Asif. Says that, would you recommend using tools like Grammarly?
Dude, you don't need any tools, man. You just need Microsoft Word. You don't need tools to check whether your grammar is right or not. Basically, you should be able to read the book and basically feel the story. When you read the book, you should be able to feel emotions, right? What is the end outcome of why do we read books? To feel an emotion, right? Why do we watch movies? To feel an emotion, right? Unless you're writing a non-fiction book, that is, right? That is plain presenting the facts. But if you're writing a fictional book, you need to be able to evoke an emotion in something, right? I really don't think Grammarly is going to help with that, right? What's going to help is how you can put a story down. Again, it does not matter whether you have great grammar skills or you have great spelling skills or any other skills. Can you put a story together that invokes an emotion in somebody else? That's the key, right? I think I mentioned that I had close to about 3,000 spell checks in my book, right? There was no Grammarly when I wrote my book. And I didn't make an attempt to even correct those errors, right? But I knew that my book, when I read it, I could evoke an emotion in myself about that story. I think that's the core, and that's the crux. So if all of that is happening, well, I think your publisher will take care of it. I don't think you need to worry about that.
Right. Okay. So Varun, over here, Aruna is saying that she started writing, but midway she's not been so consistent, and there's lack of motivation there. So how do you, when you start the story, how do you bring it to its conclusion?
Yeah, I have gone through that. I remember writing Anuwanti till part 3, and then I procrastinated a little bit till I finished part 4. Basically, the best way to do that is give the manuscript to friends who don't judge you a lot, and basically encourage you, and basically get them to say good things about the book, and get them to say that, oh, this is great, I really like it, and I think you should complete it. So that's how I was able to do it. But there is absolutely no science about a writing block. I don't think any author in the world has been able to figure out the right way to get over the writer's block. For me, it was, I've already written so much, now let me see what people say about it. And when people said, hey, dude, I love it, I think you should finish it, and I want to know what happens next, is because of which I ended up finishing the book. So give it to your friends and get some opinion, and that will probably help you finish it.
Right. Because we're talking about different stories and different characters, so I just remembered Arabian Nights, right? People, we've been hearing about Arabian Nights for such a long time. But if you see the plot, it's story inside a story inside a story, and that is what you've seen the movie Inception. That's the basic idea, right? The framework is always there in front of us. You don't have to do much, right? So what is Arabian Nights? You have King Shahryar and the princess, and he decides that because women, the women I'm marrying are not as faithful as I want them to be. So he starts killing them one by one. So then finally, the vazir's daughter is the only one left in the kingdom. And that's the time Shahryar decides, okay, if she's the one, I will marry this princess. But the conclusion is that if by the end of the night and early morning, she will die, right? So she starts telling a story. So that's how your stories keep on building up. So once you start writing and building characters, your stories will automatically start coming up. And Arabian Nights,
That's a very good point, Dedan. I think what you got to do is, if you're stuck about the entire plot and all of that, discover your story while you're writing. Like I said, I had the overall plot, right, which is the basic one line for the book. But I discovered the story while writing it, right? And that's the thing. There's something called the flow. You get so involved with what you're doing that you start coming up with ideas subconsciously, right? That's probably a very unique way to write a book, I feel, because that worked for me. So rather than in a very structural way, figuring out, okay, fine, this is the structure, this is the plot. While that's one way to do it, the way I did it was basically I drew a plot, an overall arching plot line, and then just got into the flow and got into the zone and started discovering the story as I wrote it. And I think that's definitely one way to do it as well.
Right. This one is from Spriha. She's saying, what's your opinion about self-publishing, and is it a good path to take?
Yeah, so I'm going to come to that. I think there are a lot of questions that are being asked on the whole publishing route. So I'm going to jump into that directly. So basically, how does this whole publishing thing work, right? So once you have your manuscript ready, right, basically what you're going to do is what you need to do is you need to write a proposal, right? Now, what is a proposal? A proposal, think of it like the blurb that's on the back of the book. Now, when you pick up a book, what's the first thing you do? You see the back of the book, right? Why? Because you want to see what's the book about and whether you should buy it, right? Now, that's exactly the proposal that you're going to send to the publisher, right? So make a 2-page proposal as to why this book is unique, what's the story. You don't need to make the proposal a summary. A summary is separate than a proposal. A proposal is basically an elevator pitch, right? Think of it like a startup, right? When you're pitching a startup to an investor, you're pitching a startup and you're telling them what's the problem solution, you're telling them why investors should invest in the startup, right? So think of your proposal as your pitch deck, right? Why is this book unique? Who's the target audience for this book? Why will people buy this book? Why will this book do well? And what are the qualities about this book? And what's the writing style, etc., etc. Along with that, the manuscript, and along with that, a brief bio about yourself and the first 3 chapters. Now, there is a 90% chance that your book will get picked up because of your proposal, right? So proposal is probably one of the most important things while sending it to the publisher, right? And along with that, make a nice 1-page summary of the book, and basically the summary should contain enough information about not the main plot, but again, the summary should be like, just imagine your book got reviewed in a newspaper and how would they review your book. So proposal, summary, first 3 chapters. Send this to the publisher, and these become your most important aspects to get into round 2, which is basically sending your full entire manuscript. But for round 1, the proposal is the most important bit. Now, how do you find publishers? Basically, go on Google, figure out all the list of all the publishers and cold email all of them, right? That's step 1. You'll find at least 50 publishers on Google. They all have their email listed, and they all have the process of how to submit their manuscripts. The what I just mentioned previously. Cold email all of them. That's number 1. Number 2, there's something called a commissioning agent. A commissioning agent is the person responsible in every publishing house to actually commission your book. Now, find these commissioning agents on Facebook or LinkedIn and cold DM them, right? Some will reply, some may not, but at least you're making a complete shot on trying to reach out these commissioning agents. Tell them, I have this book, I have this idea, it's great, how do I go about it? If I go the cold email route, it may just, end up just in the long line of that. Is there any way I can get ahead in the line, or I can send you the proposal directly? So reach out to these commissioning agents on Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you can find them, right? Do this with all the publishers. Now, if all the publishers reject you and no commissioning agent responds to you and absolutely nothing happens with your book, then find a literary agent. What is a literary agent? A literary agent is a person who basically is your agent and who has tie-up with all the publishing houses, and who basically gets the commissioning agent to directly read your proposal and your manuscript and etc. and get your book published in a very quick way. And they take a small percentage of your royalty, or there's an upfront payment depending on the agent. Now, does the agent route work? Well, to pick there are not too many literary agents in India, but if you find a literary agent, again, you have to go and pitch your book to them as well. They need to know why they should pick your book and become your agent, and why your book is so good or unique. And again, how do you find a literary agent? Go on LinkedIn, type literary agents. You'll find all the literary agents, reach out to them. They are waiting for people to reach out to them and send them work that and basically find people whom they can represent. So reaching out and finding a literary agent is not difficult at all. Reach out to all of these literary agents. Now, if none of the publishers work, if no literary agent is signing you up, if you can't find anything that's working for you, then self-publish, right? So the crux of what I'm going to say is, whether you find a publisher or not, you will still get a book published, right? Because self-publishing allows your book to be published. Basically, self-publishing is a process where you publish a book on your own. You need to pay an upfront fee for the process of the publishing. You can digitally publish it, or you can even get physical copies published. They send you the physical copies, then you have to tie up with Amazon or Flipkart or a distribution place where you can sell these books. Some self-publishing companies follow the entire route. They help you self-publish it, they help you sell it, they help you market it, they help you do all of that, right? Just Google self-publish your book and you'll find tons and tons of data on this, right? But that's pretty much the route of how to find a publisher and how to get published. Now, anybody has any questions on this?
Yeah, let's wait for people to ask questions on the publishing part. There's a question which is coming from Vasu. Says that there's too much of overthinking when the writing part is going on, right? And there are too many characters and there's a lot of information. So how do you curb it out and streamline it?
That's why keep the version 1 of your story simple. Add the complicated layers as you go to version 2, version 3, version 4. Right? In startup, it's called the MVP, which is the minimum viable product. Right? If you have a big startup idea, just build a very basic product out, right? Which is a basic buying and selling feature, and then add layers to it. So the way I would go about writing my book, if things are getting complicated, is stick to the basic plot, stick to basic structures, stick to basic characters, and then once the basic version of the manuscript is out, then you start adding layers, then you start adding more subplots, then you start adding more scenarios, then you start adding situations, and so on.
Right. Okay. So now we're coming to the questions about finances are coming in. So what's the process when it comes to money?
Okay. So I'll get into the next section of the thing, which is basically once you find a publisher, what happens? So basically, let's say a publisher agrees to publish your book, then you get a publishing contract, right? Now this publishing contract is a standard publishing contract that every newbie author is given, right? It's not you've got to remember that if you get a publishing contract, do not think that the publisher is trying to swindle you or do anything. The fact that you got a publishing contract is great, but obviously do get it checked with a lawyer. That's number one. When you get a publishing contract, try to keep certain rights with you, which the publishers usually do not care about. So keep the movie or screen adaptation rights with you, right? Publishers usually do not care too much about that. Try to see if you can limit the copyright to 10 years. Most publishers will want copyright for life. That means you are stuck with that same publishing house with the same deal, with the same terms of the contract for life. But if you limit the copyright years to say about 8 to 9 years, then if a book is a big hit, you can renegotiate after 8 to 9 years. So those are two key things that you need to watch out for. Second thing is basically a newbie publisher. Basically, they get an 8% royalty on the MRP of the book, right? So if your book is priced at 100 rupees, you will get 8 rupees, right? So that's pretty much the standard royalty rate that most first-time authors are given. What they also do is they give you an advance for signing your book, and basically the royalty gets deducted from that advance. So they may give you, say, 25,000 rupees and sign your book, and then they basically start deducting that 8 rupees royalty for having sold the X book. So you need to earn out that royalty, right? And after you finish that 25,000 rupees, then you start making more money if the book sells more, right? Number 4, negotiate a marketing budget for your book. Usually, publishers don't have a big marketing budget for your book. So make sure that you ask the publisher to have a strong marketing budget, because marketing is the only way a book can succeed, because there's so many books out there. And how does your book stand out? And that's with the marketing process, right? Most importantly, when you're negotiating the contract, negotiate thinking that this book is going to be a hit. Because if you don't think of that, then you're going to end up giving a lot of things to the publisher that you would regret later if the book becomes a hit. So think your book is going to become a success and only negotiate that in mind, right? And also be thoroughly involved with the whole contract process, and get the contract process out soon so that you want to get into the editing process. Like I said, there are not too many changes that the publisher will agree to in the contract because it's a standard contract, but these are the few things that you can ask for. Some authors are really smart and they say, I don't want an advance, give me a higher percentage. So don't give me that 25,000 rupees, give me 10% royalty, right? Because the book becomes a hit, then instead of 8 rupees, you're getting 10 rupees a book. So a lot of authors actually ask for a higher percentage. Most publishers don't give it, but if you negotiate well, you can get that. So that's pretty much what you need to watch out for in the contract phase. Yeah, anybody has any questions on this?
Right. So, Ampli, this is a different one. How is publishing different in India and US? What if someone wants to get an international agent? What's the different process over here?
You can do it through your publisher. I've been published in different countries through my publisher. So my publisher basically has a tie-up with the publisher in that particular country, and I get a separate new contract for each country that the book is going to get published in. If your book is a big hit, you can reach out to publish it directly in the US, right? In the contract, it will be clearly mentioned whether it's worldwide rights or rights for India only, right? So basically, if the publisher has international presence, then they'll publish your book internationally as well. But if it's an India-focused only publisher, then only hold the India rights. So you're free to reach out to any publisher abroad and basically strike up a deal with them, or ask your publisher to reach out to them.
Right. Varun, this is from Amok saying that sometimes while writing, I do not get the ideas on how to continue, but usually I'm not able to decide which is the best one from a reader's perspective.
Again, why are you worried about the readers, man? Nobody's going to read your book, right? Only when you can write a great book will people want to read it. Stop worrying about the outcome. Don't worry about who will read the book. Just worry about writing a great story. If you write a great story, readers will come. But if you're going to write with readers in mind, you'll never write a book.
Right. So far we have these number of questions, but people, if you have questions, do keep on writing and mention your name. It's important. So it becomes a very personal thing. And this is TOSB Conversations, brought to you by the Outstanding Speakers Bureau, and our guest is Varun. So it keeps on. So if you have multiple questions regarding the book, publishing, the finances, I think most of them have been answered. But let's see what else is left there. So we'll just wait for more questions. Varun, you may please start them.
So now that you got your publishing contract ready, basically you got to start the editing process, right? Now again, usually a publishing house has about 3 to 4 editors. You've got to see which editor you're most comfortable with in terms of getting the book edited. Usually the publisher will assign the editor to you, but if you feel like you're not able to gel well with the editor, request the publisher to change the editor. But do not work with an editor that you don't have a very good comfort level with. Secondly, a typical editor is editing 5 to 6 books simultaneously. So, your book is not his or her priority. So you need to have a good personal relationship with the editor to make sure that, your book is on top, when they're starting the editing process, and they're giving enough time to your book and making sure the editing work is done rightly. So make sure that whoever your editor is, you have a very close relation with that editor, and you have a very good working relationship with that editor that you can, make sure that the editing process not only is great, but the editing process is what makes or breaks your book. Pretty much. So the editor has to be a great editor. So that's something that you need to watch out for. Second is the book cover. Now, usually publishers have in-house designers that design the book cover, or they hire or they commission designers to design your book cover. I personally like to get involved in the designing of the book cover, but depends on you. If you have an artistic bent of mind, make sure that you are involved in the book cover design, because the book cover and the title is one of the most important aspects of the book. So make sure that your book cover design is something that you're paying a lot of attention to, and you're focusing on whether there's a great designer designing the cover of your book. Also remember that your book cover eventually will get displayed on a small section on an app on a phone, because most people buy online now. So your book cover should be able to jump out from that small little section on a phone on an app, and basically people should be like, whoa, what is this book about? I can see the cover and it looks very unique. So the book cover is very, very important, and your title is very, very important. Then once all of this is happening, start reaching out to prominent people or famous people to get blurbs. Again, when people read that prominent people are verifying this book and recommending this book, the chances of you selling this book becomes much, much higher. I wasn't able to do it. Back then I didn't know many people. But now with social media, it's so easy to reach out to so many people. I think you should reach out to prominent people to get recommendations so that can be published or printed on top of the book. And the most important thing is marketing your book, right? There are so many great books that I've seen, but because they haven't been marketed well, those books haven't seen the light of day. But marketing your book is the singular most important aspect of the entire writing process, of the entire publishing process, because you can have a great book, but if people don't know about it, the book is not going to go anywhere. Now, usually for the publisher, there is a standard process of marketing your book, right? One is your book launch, right, which will happen in a bookstore. That's pretty standard. Every publisher will do that for you. One is a book tour. If your book is becoming a hit, they make you do a book launch at every bookstore in the country. So they pick 5 bookstores in prominent cities and they'll make you do a book tour. They'll put you in literary festivals or literature festivals where you'll go and talk about your book, and there'll be a lot of people who come for these literature festivals. And then there is social media, which is your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you'll talk about your book there. But remember that every single author is also doing this. So if you're going to do the book launch, book tour, literature festival, social media, that is great, but that's not going to single you out from anybody else. So, for example, Amish, when he launched The Immortals of Melua, basically took a printout of the first chapter and designed a nice little cover for it, and he put it at the cash counters of all the bookstores. So, and he gave it for free. So when people read the first chapter, they got impressed with it, and then they started coming back to the bookstore to buy the book. What worked for me was basically I did a talk that went viral, and then I also made a music video on the book, which kind of went super viral, and that really helped me a lot. So I went the video route because I knew that going the standard marketing route is not going to help. Also, I gave a lot of talks. I spoke at about 500 schools and colleges across India, and through that, a lot of people got to know about my book as well. So unless and until you have a very unique marketing idea, your book is not going to do well. Now, how did I come up with this idea? Well, just think differently, right? Think what anybody else is not doing, and basically keep trying till something hits, and then a large number of people get to know about it. But unless the marketing of your book is very, very unique, I don't think your book will be able to stand out from the rest. And you don't need to be a genius to be able to figure out all of these ideas, right? Just basically try to do something very unique what anybody else is not doing. So you don't need to be a marketing expert. You don't need to have a marketing degree. You don't need to be a marketing guru. All of these are just general things that you can think about and figure out how to market your book. And now the last bit, how much money can you make as an author? Now, please remember that in India, the price of books are really low. So you can't make a full-time living as an author. Like I told you, an average author would earn about 8 rupees a book. So let's say if your book is priced at 200 and even if you make 10% royalty, which is rare, so you make 20 rupees a book, right? Now, if you sell 10,000 copies and 20 rupees, then that's 2 lakh rupees, right? That's about it. So if you sell 1 lakh copies, then that's 20 lakh rupees. And there are only about 10 authors in India who have sold 1 million copies and more. So usually the number is between 10,000 to 1 million. That is where most Indian authors fit in. So because the price of the book is so low and because the royalty rate is so low, you can't technically make a full-time living as an author unless and until you become a Chetan Bhagat or an Amish or, all of these guys or like Bikram Seth and all of these guys where, you've sold a large number of copies and hence the money that comes in from that can not only sustain your lifestyle but make you a lot of money. So unless your book becomes a staggering hit, I don't think being a published author is a full-time profession in India. But the respect it gives you, the kind of doors it opens for you, the kind of things it does for you is unprecedented. That can never be replicated. So if you're thinking of being a published author to become a full-time published author or as a career, well, I don't think that's the right idea. You should always have a job or you should always have something which brings you money. And the book is always just a small, very side income. But if it becomes a big hit, well, then you become a millionaire.
Right. Varun, this question is from Anu. She's saying that what about children's book where illustrators are also involved? Does the publishing house get involved in the cover and illustrations?
So generally what happens is with an illustration book is get an illustrator partner, right? That's what's going to make the book unique and stand out. But if you're just going to write and get the publisher to illustrate, I think the publisher is going to be like, why don't you find an illustrator to work with the book for you, and why don't you guys send us the entire package book rather than making us find an illustrator for you. I don't think a publisher will find an illustrator. You need to tie up with an illustrator, and the illustrator and you become the writer. The illustrator creates the drawings, and basically you guys together create that book and then reach out to publisher.
Right. And what about your deadlines? When you're writing
there is no deadline as such, right? Basically, there are some mini deadlines which comes in the editing process where the editor will ask you to change a few things or probably go through a few things or change some characters or change some subplots, and they give you some small deadlines for that. But there is no deadline as such. I mean, once you write the book, you give it to the publisher, and the publisher is also in a hurry to get your book out because they also want to make money off your book.
Right. Okay. This is. I think this question has come a few times. So Advant also is asking that are you going to write another book?
Well, yeah. I just mentioned right that I've kind of finished writing my second book. But the reason why it took so long is because I need to be excited about the story. I don't want to write a book just for the heck of writing. And I don't want to write a book just to get published, right? For me, I need to enjoy the process of writing the story, and I want to enjoy the process of building the characters and all of that. And only when I'm able to do that is when I want to get published, right? Because like I said, getting published is not a source of income for me, right? But having said that, I have written the second one, and it's kind of in the final stages, and you've heard about it soon.
Right. Okay, so let me see another questions. Okay, so this is from Vignesh. When you write a biography of a famous person, how do you get your royalty and fix your royalty with that person?
Well, if you write a biography of the famous person, you need to take permission from that person's estate or the person's agents. And basically, then what happens is you need to negotiate with the agent as to how much of the percentage of the book percentage will go to the person and how much will come to you. So it's very subjective. It really depends on person to person. But again, that's the negotiation that you have with the agent of that person or the estate of that person. And basically, then you decide about how the split happens.
Right. Just a reminder to all of you, we just have another 5 minutes to go. So if you have your questions, make it short and crisp and add your name. And this is the question Varun anonymously posted. How do you decide your book title, which one to go for? And how do you create a title for your book?
Can you repeat that, please?
How do you decide your book title? Which one do you want? And what is the key to creating a book title?
Well, there are no rules to creating a book title. Create a title that kind of summarizes the book basically, or kind of talks about the book. For me, the title was pretty clear because that is what the book is about, right? That's pretty much the plot. So if you look at my title, How I've Been Running Auntie and Co-Founder a $1 million Company, that's literally the plot of the book. It's not like I thought, oh, that's a cool title. Technically, I didn't have a title, right? So when I sent the manuscript to the publishers, I basically thought that this is the plot. Why not just let me put the plot of the book right as the title, so that it really indicates exactly what the book is about, and that ended up actually being the title. So it's not like I thought of a title, but eventually that title really worked for me. But how do you decide a title? Again, it's very subjective. Depends on what the flow of your book is. If it's a comic book, then you need to have a title accordingly. If it's a serious book, then you have a title accordingly. If it's a biography, you need to have a title accordingly. If it's a fantasy fiction, you need to have a title accordingly. So title really depends on the genre and the structure of the book. But there is no one set rule on how to decide the title. And also, don't overdo to try to make the title catchy, right? If while deciding a title, the title becomes catchy, then yeah. But don't think, I have to make this title catchy, right? There are enough books that without a catchy title have gone on and become bestsellers, right? So having a catchy title does not necessarily mean that your book will be successful.
Right. Okay. So I think let's take two questions. This one is from Kushal. Title part I think we've just answered, so we'll give that a miss. And Amli is asking, some writers send out tentative 3 chapters. So either it's a 3 chapters or the entire thing together. Which one would you advise?
To send to the publisher?
Yes.
You just need to send the first 3 chapters and the proposal and the summary first. And only then will they ask you to send the manuscript. And only then will they decide to publish it. So you just need to send that first.
Okay. And what about poems? That part we haven't discussed. You want to touch on that?
I don't know too much about poems, but again, it's the same process, yeah. It's exactly the same process. You do a compilation of your poems, and basically you send it to the publisher. Again, you need to the exact same process of what writing a fictional or a non-fictional book is. The same process goes for poems as well. Only problem is publishers are not too excited about poetry books because the selling point is low. Not many people buy it compared to the fiction and non-fiction. I'm not saying there's an audience. There's not an audience for it. There is a big audience, but not what is compared to a fiction and a non-fiction book, right? So again, it's your proposal that will get you published. Who is this book for? Why will they buy this book on this book of poems? And why is this book unique, etc., etc.
Right, great. I think we are coming to a close of it. So on that note, guys, if you have any questions, you can write and we'll probably send it to Varun, and you can DM him also. We'll try to answer all the questions as much as possible. But as human beings, we always have one question followed by another one. So that's the usual part. That's part of the game. So
just as a parting note, I think this is the best time to get published. Everybody is indoors. You're literally forced to now be indoors, right? Best time to sit and write your book. And like I said, whether you write 10,000 words, 50,000 words, even 5,000 words, you can always self-publish. So publishing your book is a given, right? If you can put pen to paper and put a great story out, or write about something that's important, getting published is not a big deal. If publishers say no to you, you can always self-publish. Some of the biggest publishers and some of the biggest authors in the world went ahead and self-published first, and then they got publishing contracts. So the fact that you came for this event means that you are interested in writing a book. And I'm telling you, writing a book, getting published is not a rocket science. If you get the basics right, and if you go about the few things that I told you about, just go ahead and get your book published. It's one of the coolest things that you can do in your life, and it's very easy to do. So go ahead and become a published author.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Varun, and thank you very much for taking out the time. Guys, also go and Google the website which Varun has created, Mento. I was spending time on it last evening. It's very well designed. You'll learn something from there also. And and from the entire team of Outstanding Speakers Bureau, thank you very much for being part of the TOSB Conversations. We bring in many experts from different fields, so our knowledge gets enhanced, and this is just a conversation. So as they say, बात करने से बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिलता है. Sometimes new ideas come to you. So people who want to write, something is there for you. People who want to paint, there's something else for you. If you want to tell your story in different ways, there are multiple different ways. So on that note, and from the entire team of Outstanding Speakers Bureau, thank you very much for being part of the TOSB Conversations. And remember, Fridays, Saturdays, we usually do something creative for all the people who follow us. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can always write an email to us. Finally, if you have questions which are not being answered, you can DM us or Varun. We'll be happy to take your questions up. So on that note, thank you very much and have a
Thanks so much.
Yeah, it was lovely talking to you, like always.
Thanks, guys. Have a fun weekend. Bye.
Bye bye.